Search the energy fluctuations dissipated, and Magneto walked out of the huge amounts of deep pit in a very embarrassing manner, staggering. Everyone who saw Magneto's tragedy took a breath, with fear on his face. It's too miserable, it can force a 4th level life body to such an extent. Magneto coughed twice and looked up with a gloomy look. I take back what I said earlier. You do have some abilities, but it is not enough to kill me by this. I have the ability to subvert this planet, but you don't. His eyes were fixed on Megatron, and there was a shock in the depths of his eyes. He really did not expect that the domineering shapeshifting King Kong in front of him was actually a 4th level life form just like himself. At this time, there was an untimely gargle sound. Martin picked up a towel and wiped his mouth, and sorted out his tie on his chest. This sorrow made many people speechless on the spot. Eric, leave. I'm not interested in going to Brotherhood with you. I have my own business to do. Martin shrugged and smiled softly. But in the eyes of many people, this smile is clearly a demon who has grown up with a big mouth. Magneto's face was gloomy. There were countless shapeshifting diamonds surrounding him, making him even more unwilling. He said in a low voice, "You want to make a powerful enough robot, you need a lot of precious metals. I can help you, even if it is a mineral deposit on the seabed. For me, you can take it whatever you want. Even if you want vibranium and adamantium alloys, I can get them for you." Martin laughed blankly. Seabed minerals. At that time, he only needs to create a group of shape-shifting diamonds who are good at water warfare and go to the bottom of the sea to dig. Such precious metals as vibranium and adamantium alloys? He doesn't need Magneto anymore. He will directly lead the army to attack Wakanda, directly knock down there, and occupy all the vibranium. Such a good baby. The vibranium spear and vibranium clothes that the wild men used to make some shit is a waste, and there are 2 vibranium mines on the Earth. In addition to Wakanda, there are also a large number of vibranium mines on the Antarctic continent. As for adamantium alloy, the manufacturing technology of secondary adamantium alloy can be obtained through negotiations with countries all over the world. Only true adamantium alloy, beta adamantium alloy and original adamantium alloy can really arouse Martin's interest. You better go back, Magneto, your strength is too weak, your ambitions and ideals are too narrow, it is not worthy of my refuge. Martin shook his head, rubbed a handful of hair oil on his hand, and started to comb his hair in front of the mirror on the side, making it shiny and dazzling. This kind of carelessness made Magneto suffocate in his heart. At this time, Eric, leave here. You shouldn't come to New York, and this kid won't go with you. I can feel his strong will. Professor X finally came, his voice rang and confronted Magneto. Mutant is bipolar, and actually meet in this kind of scene. Magneto snorted and shook his body. After taking a deep look at Martin, he flew up and was about to leave. At this time, boom, a bombardment of energy from a long distance blasted Magneto down. Hey, Lord Magneto, New York City is my place and you are not allowed to make trouble here. Moreover, Martin and I have a common language. Compared to you, I am more suitable for him. Iron Man wore a rather slender new type of armor and flew quickly, and at the same time was playing exciting music outside. At this moment, Magneto was completely irritated, and roared to his feet, with a hideous expression on his face. Stark, do you think you dare to face me after changing a set of scrap iron? What about it, Scrap Iron King? Tony's voice was awkward, and his self-confidence was overwhelming. He spent huge amounts of energy to build this anti-Magneto armor, and today it is finally time to exert his power. Court death. Magneto sneered and raised his hand to produce a terrible magnetic force. In a sudden, the anti-Magneto device of the anti-Magneto armor was activated, but the next moment, the pride on Tony's face immediately changed because he received the artificial intelligence Jarvis sent to him. Warn. Sir, Magneto's power exceeds the previous data limit, and the anti-magnetic system you designed is difficult to resist. Time seems to be silent at this moment. Tony sighed, his face showing helplessness. I see. I might be beaten to death by him. In the next second, Tony's armor was torn apart little by the unprecedented rage's Magneto with a terrifying magnetic force. Eric, that's it. Jin, save Tony, he can't die. Professor X looked at Martin at the same time, but Martin just looked at the lively mentality. He didn't mean to rescue him at all, and he was a little helpless. Jean Grey directly used strong mental power to pull Tony out at the moment Tony was about to be torn to pieces by Magneto. Hey, beautiful lady, I owe you my life. Can I keep my phone number? Tony's mouth is still dirty to relieve his beating heart. With a cold face, Jin threw Tony to the ground roughly. Magneto sneered again and again, ignoring everyone present, and said to Martin, "My promise is still valid. It won't take long for you to understand the ugliness of this world. You are born on my side. Brotherhood opens the door for you at any time. I am waiting for you to come to me." "Can we talk?" Professor X looked at Martin gently. "Sorry, Professor X, I don't want to talk to you, we are not the same." Martin refused without hesitation, with a calm expression on his face.
"Well, although I can generally feel your rejection of me, at least, we shouldn't be enemies, shouldn't we? Neither you nor the world should be enemies." Professor X pointedly.
Martin was silent for a moment, nodded, and said, "I only want to achieve my goal. They'd better not interfere with me." "That's the best, let's go back, Chin." Professor X kept a gentle smile. Chin and Martin looked at each other and saw the meaning in each other's eyes. Looking at the figure of Professor X and Chin going away, Martin took a deep breath, recalling the momentary depression that he had just felt on Chin, thoughtfully. Just the incomplete version of Dark Phoenix is so terrible. When you get more Phoenix fragments in the future, it will be sublimated to the level of the White Phoenix or even the White Phoenix King. How powerful it should be. Martin shook his head. Phoenix Force, one of the three primitive forces of the multi-universe, has been chased wildly by countless life forms of the multi-universe. At this moment, a figure covered in blood came out of the house staggeringly, looking at the mess outside with a confused look. "Guys, I seem to have missed something, am I being beaten?" Everyone looked at him, and Martin smiled. "Yes, Bruce, your Hulk form was beaten back by Megatron. I'm afraid that big guy won't show up easily for a long time to come. NS. Dr. Banner didn't believe it, he wanted to feel the big guy in his body subconsciously, but after a few attempts, even at the moment when the change was about to be completed, Hulk yelled when he saw Megatron's sneer and looked at him. No, he hurriedly retracted. Really scared of being beaten, it's time to go back." Martin waved his hand, and the millions of huge legions began to transform into vehicle forms. In an instant, countless steel legions turned into normal mechanical equipment. At this time, Tony walked over with a sullen face, looking helpless. "I've been standing here for so long, can't you call me Roar? It's a pity, Mr. Stark, I really don't have much energy to care about you." Martin made a gesture of inviting, but it was clearly a chasing away. Tony stood with a confused face, looking around, and finally looked at Dr. Banner. The two wise heroes looked at each other, and then Dr. Banner slammed the door shut. Only Tony was standing outside, with a messy face. He, the dignified Tony Stark, a charming man, was actually rejected by a group of men in iron bumps? Hateful. Creator, what is our next combat goal? Is it to attack Magneto's Atlantic base? They should store a lot of precious metals, which should be very useful to our cause. Megatron looked eager to try, even more bloodthirsty. Dr. Banner felt the sharp pain in his body and looked at him fearfully. "No, we have a better goal, you say. What will happen to attacking an independent kingdom with endless vibranium mines?" Martin's eyes flashed with brilliance, he picked up the globe on the table, and after a round, he went straight. "I clicked somewhere in Africa. The kingdom of Wakanda is roughly in this area. Good idea, if you allow me, I will lead 1,000,000 soldiers to capture this place." Megatron's eyes brightened, bursting out terrifying blood. Dr. Banner gave a startled roar. "Assault on an independent kingdom, God, this is a serious violation of international law. You will be defined as a terrorist." As soon as this sentence came out, both Martin and Megatron looked at him with surprise. "Bruce, you may be mistaken a little. In this world, they at most define me as a super criminal, the world's #1 villain, but no one dares to accuse me of being a terrorist, because they dare not. Just like Dr. Doom in Latvini, it's the same thing with Aiken." Martin suddenly laughed. On the current Earth, there are indeed many powerful characters that make him jealous, such as Kamar Taj's Ancient One, Kunlun's leader Jade Emperor, etc., but this definitely does not include the so-called Wakanda. Well, if based solely on the Wakanda's combat power in the movie, Megatron's million army only needs one charge to destroy Wakanda. What Black Panther, you have to die. The shape-shifting King Kong who can play, analyze, and manipulate thermal weapons are not comparable to the mass-produced weapon pioneers of Thanos in the movie. The group of lowly mindless creatures who only know how to call and rush to bite, and compared to his shape-shifting King Kong army corps, he was simply vulnerable. But if it was Wakanda in the comics, that would be a bit interesting.
Wakanda in the comics, but there are gods sheltering. Dr. Banner, do you know why I prefer to contact you instead of Tony Stark?
Martin sat comfortably on the sofa, completely spotless, took a sip with a cup of coffee, and said lightly. Before Banner could speak, he immediately said, because your bottom line is lower than Stark.
You were born in the military and your profession is a physical scientist. You and your father worked specifically for General Ross, researching powerful biological weapons. After cruel experiments with your hands, you must have done a lot. Compared to you, Tony is not enough. Ruthless, his heart was too soft. He saw some civilians killed by his weapons and decided to close the weapons department. This behavior, a bit silly, but it's also a heroic move.
Martin exclaimed. He didn't know if he was admiring the coffee's mellow taste, or admiring Tony's behavior.
Compared to Tony, Dr. Banner has a lower bottom line. Apart from anything else, when he transformed into Hulk, were there few innocent people affected by him to death. Time and time again, the bottom line was broken frequently.
Coupled with 2 generations of father and son carrying out cruel human experiments for the military, some things have long been deeply embedded in Dr. Banner's blood.
Dr. Banner stared blankly, his eyes blank. Martin got up, poured a cup of coffee for Dr. Banner, then patted Banner on the shoulder again, turned and went out.
Dr. Banner's father, this is also a very tricky guy. Although it has been dead for a long time, in fact, the soul has already been taken away by the Oba under the terrifying things. At this moment, I am afraid that I am in hell, watching Banner coldly and cruelly, everything. Hulk. But the possessing other's body that is fancy by all things expels the shell, but that is already a matter of many years later. What is needed under all things is a mature Hulk body, not the current baby form. Martin walked out slowly, looked up at the sky, and after a while, he said, Megatron, we set out, immediately organize an army to cross the Atlantic and enter the African continent. We should also have a base of our own. As you wish, Lord Creator. Megatron smiled grinningly and raised his hand. Numerous shapeshifting King Kong began to shapeshifting rapidly, and under the stunned countless passers-by, they began to swarm toward the beach. After a long time, someone who was frightened and silly screamed, "That's the car I just bought, you robber." Martin drove his Beetle, moving with the torrent of steel that was rolling away, with a face of indifference. After a while, he suddenly turned his head to take a look, and immediately saw that Dr. Banner was chasing frantically from behind, and a smile appeared on his face immediately. He parked on the side of the road and opened the door to let Dr. Banner come in. "Looks like you figured it out, Bruce," Martin said. Banner took a breath and fastened his seatbelt immediately, looking at him with a complicated expression. "Where else can I go besides following you? Only you can defeat the monster in my body."
The torrent of steel went all the way, and on the way, countless eyeballs exploded. This terrifying army of steel makes people tremble. If you look down from a high altitude, this shocking scene will only be even more shocking. With countless murderous weapons moving at an exaggerated speed, everyone who saw this scene was silent.
"When we take Wakanda, what should the residents do?" Megatron, which had been transformed into an F-22 fighter jet, suddenly sent a message. "Does this kind of question still need to be asked?" Martin looked astonished, as if Megatron asked an incurably stupid question. "Definitely kills all of them to prevent future troubles. The vibranium mine must belong to Cybertron. All, not those savage screaming ghosts, can get involved. In the whole Wakanda, except for a leopard god who is partial to spirituality and faith, the others are dregs. Clean up all. The entire Wakanda is bound to become Martin's main base on the Earth, without any traces of external forces. Just kill all those savages who like to scream." Millions of steel legions roared past like this, and soon arrived at the sea, facing the endless sea. In the harbor, there are a large number of ships gathering. At this moment, many people are looking up at the terrifying army that covers the sky and the sun, with a dull look. Dr. Banner looked at the sea and said, "These soldiers of yours seem to be land-type soldiers. How do you cross the sea?"
Megatron on the side swooped down from the air, instantly turning into a huge amounts of humanoid combat form and hitting the ground, suddenly laughing.
Martin couldn't help but smile, and pointed his finger at the harbor. "Aren't everything here my soldiers?" Banner's heart jumped wildly. "It's fine if you robbed a group of vehicles to make soldiers, and now you have to rob even the ships in the harbor? It's not grabbing, Bruce, I'm taking it, I just give them life. Are they willing to follow me, blame me?" The smile on Martin's face grew thicker. At this time, from afar, the military's Atlantic fleet was hurriedly approaching, and a drone had already flown in. "Martin, stop your army, otherwise it will be regarded as a serious provocation to the military." There was a voice from the drone. Martin looked at it with a glance, and the drone was instantly activated and turned into a shape-shifting King Kong standing in place with a respectful look. Before he knew it, the smile on Martin's face was cruel. It's so noisy, but it's okay. I originally planned to activate only a part of the ships and let the remaining soldiers who can't load them run directly from the bottom of the sea to Africa. Since you brought them to the door, I'm not welcome. To be honest, the commander of this fleet also bit the bullet and issued a warning, but whenever he has a choice, he will never do such a thing. But there is no way. Martin is pulling a destructive army and rampaging across the United States. What is this? Moreover, these troops were the private property of the local people not long ago, which is terrible. If the military does not act, it will only be sprayed to death by the people. Therefore, after receiving the notice, the Atlantic Fleet had to bite the bullet and issue a warning to Martin. But with just a look, the drone sent out was activated into a robot. The strong signal this gives is already very obvious. In the high-level meeting, all high-level generals looked at him with sullen expression. It's too rampant, it's too rampant. What the hell does he want to do? He is a declaration of war on the United States. I demand that a plan to contain Martin be presented immediately. No matter what it is, it must be taken out anyway. Countless people were yelling, Roar yelled loudly. Finally, a plan was thrown out. If you must use force to overwhelm him, then the most likely solution at the moment is a large-scale firepower scrubbing. We can only bet that his tyrannical ability has an upper limit. Although I don't know where he plans to go with such a huge army, according to the assessment of psychoanalyst, it is nothing more than establishing bases overseas. Let us sit back and watch a group of wisdom build power on the earth. Absolutely impossible.
Then, I propose to directly let the Atlantic Fleet carry out fire coverage, and let all the missile bases on the west coast open fire, completely bury Martin.
As soon as this plan was put forward, everything fell silent, and everyone frowned, his face showing hesitation. This is too risky, but in the same way, an ability like Martin is really terrible. It would be nice to say if it was just a person who made War Machine. If you consider that the creation of a brand new intelligent life, the three views and preferences are simply difficult to evaluate. In the silence, everyone looked at each other, some raised objections, and some went silent. Seaside. Martin looked into the distance and looked at the Atlantic Fleet, which had been patrolling but refused to approach. The smile on his face was always maintained. Everyone who saw this smile through the satellite only felt a chill from his spine. They saw that Martin slowly raised his hands, pointing in the direction of the Atlantic Fleet. Stop, Martin, if you attack the army, they will definitely not let you go. There are now hundreds of missile bases and a large number of missiles have been directed at you. Professor X's voice suddenly came to Martin's mind sounded. Martin paused and laughed suddenly. Charles, I am looking forward to this scene. I am waiting for them to mobilize countless missiles to attack me. In that case, I will have a large number of blue soldiers. The same level 4. Living body, you should know that I can do it. In Apocalypse, Apocalypse forcibly controls Professor X through Professor X's mind control ability. He directly controls the staff of all nuclear bomb launch bases in the world, and starts to launch all nuclear bombs frantically, attacking all over the world. It is no exaggeration to say that if it had not been stopped that time, human civilization would have been directly hit hard, and the entire surface would no longer be suitable for human survival. And what Professor X can do is also the 4th level Martin, definitely has the same power, but unfortunately, ordinary people have not realized how terrifying the 4th level life form is. The timeline of this world has not experienced the tragic consequences of the Apocalypse recovery that was almost annihilated, nor the bloody battle between superhero and supervillain, so it has never experienced Magneto being forced to directly subvert the Earth's magnetic field. The madness of crashing the Earth definitely, the latter is what happened in the comics. The 4th level mutant is enough to cause tragic man-made natural disasters on a life planet, and the 4th level can even determine the direction and future of a civilization. It is a pity that many people did not realize this. In this era when Iron Man was just born and Avengers was not formed, in the era when many powerful enemies of the universe who broke the stars with one punch and squeezed the sun with their bare hands had not yet appeared, level 4, not many people can really realize the terrible life form. Professor X's voice sounded again. Martin, I don't want to be an enemy of you, but what you have done has severely disrupted the fragile balance of this world. I hope you stop, otherwise I can only control you with mental power, NS. You can't do it, Charles, I am me. It is impossible to become someone else. I am absolutely immune to mind control, Martin said lightly. Professor X definitely didn't believe it. He had to use his powerful mental power to control Martin, but he was shocked to find that what he was facing was an invisible wall. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't peek at the other end of the wall. Minutes. Are you a level sub-godfather? Professor X shook his face. As long as it is a life, unless the mental power is stronger than me, or I rely on external force to shield it, it is absolutely impossible to block my mind control directly. It doesn't matter anymore, Charles. Martin chuckled, and suddenly, the power of the fire source began to explode, swept away everything in front of him, and activated the Atlantic Fleet. Fire, fire, scour the floor and kill this anti-human lunatic. A long and stern cry sounded in the US military. In an instant, across the east coast of America, countless missile silos began to operate, and a large number of missiles rose into the sky. The activating power of the fire source burst out in an instant, and in an instant, if it was more terrifying than the speed of light, it directly crossed the vast sea and surpassed time and space, and the activated ability swept across the entire Atlantic in an instant. Fleet. In an instant, the countless steel battleships seemed to come alive, and everything was perceived by Martin. Even as small as a screw, it suddenly became alive, roared with Martin. This is the terrible source of fire, the source of life for all shape-shifting King Kong. This source of fire was originally supposed to be placed in the core of the steel planet Cybertron, as the source of life and driving energy, maintaining the existence of Cybertron. Can easily maintain a highly developed steel planet and hold countless energy-consuming shape-shifting diamonds. It is conceivable that the energy index contained in this fire source is infinite, which has long exceeded that of a single universe. Scope.
It is no exaggeration to say that even a single infinite gems cannot compete with the source of fire. Because infinite gems are mass-produced ghost gadgets after all, there are as many sets of infinite gems as there are universes, and multi-universes worthless at all. Each set of infinite gems has its own specific bundled universe, and you can get it out of a specific universe. When other universes go, they will simply be abolished, and it's not as good as a stone on the side of the road.
In Avengers vs Justice League, this classic linkage comic, the gangster on the DC side, Darkseid, grabbed the gem-studded Infinity Gauntlet and studied it for a long time, then crushed it and threw it away with disdain. Everyone in it said, the power carried on this is not from this universe and is of no use at all. Unless is above the 6 mass-produced infinite gems, the 3 infinite gems with unique attributes are the only one in the world, and there is only one multi-universe, which can be comparable to the fire source. In front of all machines, I am the supreme mechanical god. There was a bright light in Martin's eyes, the whole person facing the sea, but there was no spring blossoms, some only had endless dominance and desire for control. The waves that are set off are just the ripples of this terrifying coercion, and the splashing water lifts the throne of the supreme god high. In an instant, countless fire roars spread throughout the American continent. The moment Martin opened his hand and took over the fleet in front of him, countless missiles were launched in a sudden, directed at Martin at the seaside, and he wanted to be with him, buried together with his countless army. Wow. Fleet Commander Dickens Barlow, with red eyes, ordered the fire, intending to make the final fight. He couldn't give Martin a chance. Apart from anything else, Martin's millions of terrorist army can be buried with a single fire. However, even though he is an excellent commander, commanding the most powerful fleet on the planet, he is just a mortal, and his subordinates are just a group of mortals. They can truly change a life planet. In front of the 4th level life body he walked toward, his life was as humble as an ant. There was no attack, and all the fleet was silent. Fire. Why not fire? Barlow roared loudly, bloodshot in his eyes. General, it's too late. I received feedback that we have lost control of the fleet, the adjutant said bitterly. All? Yes, all. The most powerful fleet ever on this planet, the Atlantic Fleet, doesn't belong to us anymore. The adjutant took off the hat from his head and drew a cross on his chest, showing a sorrowful smile, with a look of despair in his eyes. In an instant, this ship with hundreds of file-size battleships, including 3 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, suddenly began to riot, and they began to change wildly one by one. On each battleship, there were millions of complexities. The parts are being converted. Especially the 3 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, the power that erupted is the most shocking. With these 3 captain-meter-long seas and land, every seemingly subtle change in the shapeshifting performed at this moment can trigger a terrible wave in the surrounding sea. All those who saw this scene through satellites were all stunned.
Have you ever seen a 300-meter-long guy who transformed from a ship into a giant-like robot? Now they have seen it. On the steel behemoth that was gradually standing up, the terrifying barrel stretched out and spread to the body hundreds of meters long. Just looking at it made people thrilled, and the liver and gall were cracked.
With a single step, you can kick out a wave comparable to a small tsunami and shoot it on the beach. What is even more frightening is that a large number of military personnel fell from this monster one after another, and were forcibly thrown out by this monster. Many people had already closed their eyes in pain and did not dare to look at them. Falling from such a high place to the sea is no different from falling to the concrete floor from the same height. In other words, these service personnel are dead. Kill them all, leave none, and dye the sea red with blood. That's the price to provoke me. Martin spoke slowly, his voice calm. Martin looked like a god, overlooking the slaughter of the numerous steel beasts, and the screams resounded over the ocean for a long time. His eyes were filled with a kind of indescribable indifference and ruthlessness. He looked at every enemy without a corpse, without any mood swings. If you act on me, you must be prepared to be countered by me cruelly. Martin squinted his eyes and looked ahead. In the sea below his feet, there were bright blood reds, which was gorgeous and fascinating. The world has become quiet, which is really wonderful. After the hundreds of steel beasts in front of him had cleaned up the enemy, they repeatedly scanned the sea with their electronic eyes. After confirming that there were no omissions, they walked slowly towards Martin, kneeled respectfully on one knee, and lowered his arrogant head. Everything looks terrifying, yet it looks so shocking. It's just a bunch of rubbish. Megatron suddenly turned his head away, with a look of disdain. These guys' body materials are extremely poor. Although they have been strengthened by the fire source, they are still limited by the material originally. He definitely has reason to contempt, because as long as he takes the shot, don't look at the whole body of the hundreds of big guys in front of him. It seems very terrible, but in fact, he can chop them all alone. Even if he stood in place, let these guys take full action, only passively withstand and never attack. He. Even if the energy is exhausted, don't want to leave a trace of scars on his powerful body. The orthodox shapeshifting King Kong should be born out of a device called the Nurturing Warehouse. Whether it is the body material or various operating systems, it will be equipped from the beginning. Just look at the new shapeshifting King Kong Association awakening born from it. What kind of gene sequence, are good at hand-to-hand combat, are good at scientific research, are good at architecture, are good at strategy. Such an orthodox shapeshifting King Kong, unless it is the spy-type King Kong, is more fragile, and other units are so strong that they are terribly strong, and it is a normal operation to pick up the laser cannon with bare hands. These guys, not to mention the inferior body material, and the body structure is also extremely rough. Many places just look mighty. In fact, it is purely redundant. It will only affect the combat efficiency on the battlefield. Megatron was extremely picky, and his red eyes kept scanning and sneered. Don't say that, Megatron, it's his own soldier anyway, don't discriminate. Martin smiled and looked at these soldiers with admiration. Seriously, he didn't dislike it at all, and there was nothing to dislike. Megatron had this bad temper, and those big red eyes stared, making everyone look at trash. Regardless of whether you are awesome or not, there is no essential difference to Megatron, because he only needs to look at you and automatically classify you as rubbish and will look down on you. This guy couldn't even look down on the 13 apostles, and as long as possible, even the Emperor of the Universe would dare to stab him in the back. Only when looking at Martin, will there be more sincerity and loyalty in those cruel and bloodthirsty eyes. This is Megatron, ambitious, unscrupulous in order to achieve unintended purpose. This is also his charm. Roar, roar, roar. At this time, those hundreds of missiles spanned a long distance of thousands of miles, blasting from all over the United States one after another, pulling out extremely long white smoke in the air. There was a harsh roar, and it accurately banged towards Martin, who was standing in the center. Will it succeed? Will it blow up this terrible monster?
Go to hell, Executioner. Damn murderer. He destroyed the Atlantic fleet and killed all the servicemen. He is a demon.
There are countless people watching this scene through satellite signals. I don't know how many people watched it calmly, let alone how many people gritted their teeth, revealing a deep fear. Facing such a Martin, no one is not afraid. Some people even directly suggested launching a nuclear bomb. If it wasn't for Martin's location too close to New York, they were afraid that this plan would really be passed, and they would directly wash the ground with a nuclear bomb and wipe out Martin and his army. Megatron raised his head and glanced, with a cruel face, raising his hand to order the countless shapeshifting King Kong to fire and blow up these missiles. No, Megatron, some guys in high positions need to truly realize my horror. I want them to understand what fear is because the times are different. The era of the extraordinary is coming, just I will personally start this prelude. Martin closed his eyes. The power of the fire source burst out in all directions in an instant, and in a crash, it covered everything. The terrifying activation of ability instantly transformed these countless powerful missiles into his own soldiers on the spot. And still, the most terrifying soldier who blew up. The people hiding behind the screen looked dull as they watched the missiles lose contact with their operating system, and slumped directly on their seats, looking desperate. ZZ. Martin's face suddenly appeared on the screen, his face calm. He said lightly, "Fear, arrogant fellows, your corpses will make some idiots wake up." As soon as his voice fell, the large number of missiles suddenly began to change directions. In a crash, they returned the same way and pounced on major military bases. It's like the scene of the end of the world. Hundreds of thousands of powerful missiles returned directly to the original route. In the roar's whistle, the warheads clearly revealed a scornful face, and they rushed directly to the major military bases. In some bases, there are even sealed nuclear bombs. Many high-level executives looked at this doomsday-like scene with a look of collapse and despair. They lost their bet. This dense missile fire, instead of bombing and killing the demon Martin, was instantly manipulated and turned into a death attacking themselves. God sickle.
God, have you abandoned us? Why is this? No, I didn't do anything wrong. Martin is damned, we did it right. But why is this the result?
Who can stop these bombs? Magneto? No, he won't help us. It's the limit if we don't directly help Martin attack us. Many of the people sitting in front of the screen went crazy on the spot. The terrible strength Martin showed was far beyond the limit of their imagination. In just an instant, will all the supersonic missiles be activated? What a terrible ability this is. Martin is not Professor X in Magneto, he doesn't need to keep it, he can vent his anger at will. Martin admires his masterpiece, expecting to see the destruction of half of the American military base. Maybe he will be lucky, maybe he can see the beautiful mushroom cloud of the nuclear bomb explosion? Stop, Martin, you can send these missiles directly into space. Why do you want to intensify the conflict in this way? A hurried voice came into Martin's mind again.
Martin frowned. Charles, they attacked me first. The Atlantic Fleet attacked me, and I destroyed the Atlantic Fleet. Many military bases attacked me, and I used their weapons to destroy these bases. Is there a problem?
Definitely there is a problem. My child, some things can't be solved by equal harm, but will make things worse. If you do this, you are undoubtedly declaring war on the entire human race, Professor X said anxiously. No, these idiots don't represent human beings. At least, I am a human being. This cannot be changed. I will make it clear that they are dead, and these missiles will fall on them one by one. Martin corrected with a serious face. In Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, Professor X took a deep breath and put on the brainwave amplifier directly, intending to fight for it. He couldn't just watch the outbreak of World War III, and once it broke out, it would be devastating. Many super ability and mutants will participate in the battle. You know, since World War II, the number of various Superman types has been gradually increasing. It is really unimaginable that a world-class war will break out. During World War II, Professor X and Magneto were just children, and their lethality was limited. Shin hasn't been born yet. Now what? Forgive me, I must do this. Professor X has a solemn expression. With the help of the brainwave magnifier, he directly connects to Martin's location, and then his huge mental power stretches out and directly pounces on the shape-shifting King Kong. He directly gave up his plan to control Martin. That terrible mental barrier was the only one he had seen in his life, and it was unresolvable and insurmountable, so he directly chose to control millions of shape-shifting King Kong. As long as it is life, there will be spirit and soul. As long as there is spirit and soul, they will all be influenced by him. Professor X is very confident. I will control these robots and shoot down these missiles, Professor X whispered. Seaside. Megatron's eyes flickered, and he noticed a mental power intrusion, and suddenly sneered. Where are the bugs? Get out. Numerous shape-shifting King Kong raised their heads, showing cold and cruel faces one after another. Martin also turned his head in surprise, and immediately understood. Charles, you are too naive, and you are also seeking your own death. Martin shook his head, and instantly noticed all the mental conditions of the shape-shifting King Kong, and immediately, he directly used the only strongest weapon in his hands, the fire source. The life source of all shape-shifting King Kong contains terrible biological energy and spiritual energy, and reserves all the soul and memory of shapeshifting King Kong. This is the source of fire. This means that the fire source is storing the spirit of every shapeshifting King Kong, including Megatron. Martin directly activated the power of the fire source. Suddenly, Professor X went deep into the spirit of all the shapeshifting King Kong and planned to control these big guys. His face suddenly changed. He was shocked to discover that there was only one spiritual source for all the shapeshifting King Kong. Such an endless ocean of spirits. What the hell is this? This source broke out suddenly, turned into a terrifying mental tsunami, and rushed towards Professor X in an instant. The brainwave amplifier, which can be called the pinnacle of human creation, directly erupted with terrible sparks and was clearly overwhelmed. Professor X himself was even more overwhelmed. With a scream, blood overflowed from his eyes, nose and mouth, and he passed out into a coma. Professor Chin and the others gave a startled roar and rushed over in panic. At this time, those missiles have successively arrived at major military bases. All the missiles roar whistled back. Some military bases planned to activate anti-interception systems, but they collapsed and discovered that they had lost control of the base. That devil actually controls our military base? He will go to hell. A technical soldier screamed in despair, and watched the missile fall down on the screen. At the bottom of the screen, it was the base command where he was located. At the moment, the soldier drew the pistol from his waist, tears overflowing from the corner of his eyes, and committed suicide by swallowing his gun with a bang, leaving this desperate world earlier. The next moment he pulled the trigger. Rumble. A terrible explosion sounded, and the flames that swallowed everything enveloped everything, and all were incinerated into ashes. Numerous soldiers were directly swallowed, burned to dust on the spot, and died in pain. The exploded missiles directly brought terrible disasters to many bases, but this is not the end. Boom. There was a slight vibration that shook the entire United States. A huge amounts of mushroom cloud rose into the sky in California. The beautiful mushroom-shaped cloud showed a hideous and ugly face to the whole world. Everyone fell into a sluggishness, but anyone who saw this mushroom cloud knew what it meant. Nuclear bomb. Actually, a nuclear bomb was detonated. Why is it so? Someone slumped to the ground, crying in a low voice. The whole world suddenly fell into silence, not even daring to breathe, tremblingly mobilized the satellites from space to observe the man who caused this nightmare-like scene. Martin. They only saw Martin slowly raising his head, the smiling face that he showed, as if he had only done a trivial thing. This is indeed a trivial matter. Is it difficult to detonate a nuclear bomb for fun? Any serious attack that any 4-level life form can hit at will cause much more serious consequences than a small nuclear bomb. It's a pity that no one can clearly realize this. In front of the strong, nuclear bombs are toys. With this big firework, I hope that those idiots can settle down well, eat quietly and wait for death. Isn't it good? Do you have to jump out and die for the sake of boring interests and dignity? Martin was a little helpless, shrugged, bowed his head and sorted out the tie he had quietly taken care of. Looking at it, many warships directly turned into vehicle forms. Martin nodded with satisfaction and raised his foot directly onto an aircraft carrier. Millions of shapeshifting King Kong also acted one after another, climbing towards each battleship with hands and legs. This one stepped on that one, and from time to time the shapeshifting King Kong was dragged down by the big man behind, and was trampled down in a muddle-headed manner. It was extremely miserable. The scene seemed a little funny for a while. Hey, I'm overloaded, and I'm going to swim like you in King Kong. The destroyer yelled dissatisfiedly. After a fierce battle, hundreds of warships have been packed with shapeshifting King Kong, which is the neatest and most expansive aircraft carrier on Martin's aircraft carrier. Only him and Megatron are there. Anyone who wants to climb on this aircraft carrier with short eyes will be kicked out directly by Megatron, and his body will be kicked to pieces, and he will be miserable. The boat is full of shapeshifting diamonds, and there is no other way but to run on 2 legs. Fortunately for them, the material that has been strengthened by the fire source can withstand a certain amount of water pressure, but not all shapeshifting diamonds can bear it. It is destined to have a small batch of shapeshifting diamonds buried on the bottom of the sea. Especially the little things that watches and mobile phones have become. In this regard, Megatron had a cold face. The soldiers in front of him would be his soldiers, members of the Decepticon army he formed. He never needed waste. The huge fleet, with the steel torrent of millions of swimming, headed for the African continent mightily, ignoring the gazes of many prying eyes, just so arrogant and domineering, going straight all the way, extremely powerful. But no one dared to provoke. Everyone saw the end of the provoke. Even the nuclear bomb was a toy in the man's hands, and the man's behavior style had no scruples. He was not afraid to start a global war on his own. A terrible and domineering attitude is truly intimidating. Strong, honest people are not scary, such as Professor X, who can wipe out half of the human beings in an instant. Tyrants with rivals are not terrible, such as Magneto that can overthrow a continent. The most terrifying thing is Martin, who is powerful, unscrupulous, and has a clear purpose. He will not be involved and fettered by boring foreign objects. He will only stare at the target and kill those who stand in the way. This is the type of person that makes the leaders of the great powers who control everything the most headache, and they don't know how to control him at all. Time passed in panic and tension. Martin had led his huge army to the African continent, and the Iron Torrent rolled by. Drip. Congratulations to the host for completing the unexpected mission and deterrence, and rewarding a chance to draw a lottery.
Martin stepped on the land of the African continent, looking at the light curtain in his mind, watching the images flashing on it. There are various well-known shape-shifting diamonds, but only the Decepticons are lit up, and the Autobots are still it is gray, indicating that it is not available for extraction.
He also saw many sacred objects, and he even saw the top 10 artifacts above the sacred objects. This is too greedy for him. Lottery. Congratulations to the host, you won the Decepticons combined King Kong Hercules. It's a Hercules. Martin looked surprised. Combination King Kong. This is a ruthless character that can be called a battlefield behemoth. Several shape-shifting King Kong that are not originally powerful, at least not as good as the leader King Kong, can be combined with each other and can be quickly spliced into a huge monster on the battlefield. Rampage. In fact, if you don't count the submarine madness, which is recognized as the strongest naval battle and the worst on the land, the Hercules is recognized as the weakest chicken in the most hip land warfare. He always goes wrong at critical moments. It's the shame of the combined King Kong, but even so, the consideration of enhancing the impact of the Legion is also a surprise. As soon as Martin raised his hand, he directly summoned the Hercules. Soon, a light curtain shone out of Martin's mind. As he quickly portrayed it, 6 figures gradually stood in front of Martin. A total of 6 light green construction vehicles shape-shifting King Kong stood in front of Martin one after another: sweepers, mixers, dump trucks, cranes, excavators, bulldozers. These 6 guys are the components of the combined King Kong Hercules. Open black lens bracket Hercules, closed black lens bracket, Decepticon Army Demolition Unit, mixed King Kong. Character. Chaos, Wisdom -45%, Coordination -65%. Height. Meters, open black lens bracket energy, 8.4 million closed black lens bracket open black lens bracket body, healthy closed black lens bracket. Combat power, level 4, pseudo, famous saying, thinking and victory cannot be confused. Evaluation. The genius scientists of the Decepticons have developed an epic-making combination technology.
The first experimental product of the new technology is Hercules. He once caused huge amounts of trouble to the Autobots. He was an invincible behemoth on the battlefield before being strongly defeated by Dolly King Kong. The only drawback is that the brain is not very easy to use. The 6 minds compete with each other for control of the body. Team up with this guy and be careful not to be killed by him accidentally. Closed black lens bracket.
Looking at the data of Hercules, Martin rubbed his eyebrows. To be honest, the data with the same outstanding shortcomings and advantages was indeed within his expectations. With normal combined diamonds, as long as they are combined, there is only one head for thinking and making decisions. The shape-shifting diamonds, which constitute other body parts, automatically fall into a spectator state, and can only see and hear, and can't even speak. But Hercules is more sophisticated. He just doesn't. He can think about all 6 components, and all have the ability to decide and execute. It is conceivable how unreliable this guy is. It is common for his left foot to trip over his right foot. Matter. Ah, Lord Creator, I am dazzled by your glory. My work is a monument to the enemy, and I am honored to be able to work for you. Shoveler took the lead in making a gentleman's courtesy, and what he said was his famous saying. Although it is very nonsense, Megatron, they handed it over to you, and it's a very powerful combat power if you use it well. Martin couldn't help rubbing his forehead again, his head hurt. Megatron braved the cold and strode forward. Regarding the relevant information about Hercules, he had already searched it in his brain's database, and as a matter of course, this guy still couldn't make him feel satisfied with his arrogance. Only the combined King Kong that he can recognize is naturally the most terrifying and powerful in the legend, and even a single component can directly confront his leader King Kong from the ancient times to the present day, the most in history. Strong, fit King Kong, huge, ferocious. That guy is the most perfect, ruthless character. To make a comprehensive assessment, the complete form of the giant ferocious, I am afraid that it has already stepped into the level sub-godfather, and this is still the case without the use of external force strengthening. Comparing with the ferocious giant, these 6 things in front of me, how do they look like rubbish? Ah, Lord Megatron, when we meet for the first time, I am willing to obey your will. The sweeper came up with an awkward flattery. You 6 high-level wastes, listen to me, and your task is to charge for a while. If I let you charge, you will charge me until the end of the coastline. If anyone pulls his hind legs, I will tear it myself. Replace the body parts he represents with other shapeshifting diamonds. Megatron's face was stubborn, and the red light in his eyes kept flashing as he spoke, full of deterrence, and scared the 6 guys who had no spine to tense. While talking, the exaggerated steel legions landed one after another, constantly moving one after another. There are millions of shapeshifting King Kong who came on foot all the way up from the bottom of the sea, and came directly to the shore. Many shapeshifting diamonds have even suffered serious damage to their bodies. This is nothing to do. The water compaction on the bottom of the sea is too terrifying. Walking from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Africa, there are a large number of shapeshifting diamonds that have been directly crushed into scrap iron forever. Was buried on the bottom of the sea. You are dead, it's better to give me some damage to your body. A shapeshifting King Kong turned into a Ferrari, looked at a Cadillac shapeshifting King Kong next to him, and he directly tore off one of his opponent's arms and received it on his empty arm. This scene is very common. There are too many shapeshifting diamonds that are walking and staggering, and their parts are smashed all the way. Their bodies are not strong in the first place. That terrifying army was noticed by Wakanda for the first time. Certain technologies of the Wakanda people do have 2 brushes, which are unique in the world. Although the various technologies they pointed out are a bit crooked, and they don't know how these savages climbed the technology tree, they are indeed very prominent in some aspects. It is really that they are too lucky to guard the vibranium mine like a million gold oil. There are countless vibraniums used at will, and it's no wonder that the guys in Wakanda, while maintaining the savage tribe system, can also produce things that are not even available in the civilized countries outside. At the moment, in the Wakanda palace, high-rise buildings are gathered, and the complexion is dignified. The old king is also the current Black Panther T'Chaka, Prince T'Challa, Princess Surui, Chief Guard Ori. The top of Wakanda gathered together, their faces extremely ugly. The smartest Surui turned the special bracelet on his wrist on the spot. From this high-tech creation, a floating screen appeared immediately. The scene on the screen was the army of shapeshifting King Kong who had landed on the scene.
On the endless coastline, this terrifying army that can't see the end is silent and full of silence. Just looking at it makes one's scalp numb and fearful.
They watched as the hundreds of warships also began to change rapidly, turning into shapeshifting King Kong with scary postures one after another. Martin, the powerful Superman that suddenly appeared in the crisis, is visually classified as a level 4 life form, even more powerful, with a lower probability of being a level sub-godfather life form. These robots are weapons of war he made casually. This person's super ability is to turn all machinery into robots, and according to the information I have, he has absolute control over these robots. This is the worst condition. Surui pointed to the image and talked freely. His face was extremely ugly, and delicate beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Everyone looked at him, especially Prince T'Challa. He knew the wisdom of this sister too well. If Martin is here, he will make the first move. The person to be killed is not Black Panther or Leopard God, but Surui. Surui, in the wisdom assessment of the Marvel system, is full, smarter than the gods, and she has the wisdom of level universe in her small head. The level of intelligence of this woman is an order of magnitude higher than Tony Stark. How terrible is such wisdom? Let's take an example. Hulk, who is called the 8th smartest and surnamed Xiao, just glanced at the explosion screen on TV. It didn't even last a second, and he actually figured out which parallel the explosion came from. The universe blew up. And Surui's wisdom ranking is higher than the surname Xiao, and he is naturally smarter. There is no doubt that this man is eyeing Africa. It is an inevitable plan to get a piece of land here to build a base, just like Magneto back then, but also a more terrifying possibility. He knows the existence of our Wakanda. In order to we seize the vibranium mine in our hands, Surui said with a heavy face. But we have never communicated with the outside world. The only people who know our existence are the Atlanteans. Why can he know our existence? T'Challa's face changed drastically. Surui said, there are many possibilities. Maybe his ability is beyond our imagination. He can perceive the mechanical devices inside our Wakanda on the other side of the earth, and then know our existence. This is the greater possibility I can calculate. There are even more dangerous speculations that she did not say. Based on all the information she has collected, combined with all of Martin's micro-expressions and micro-movements, and the destination, Martin clearly knew the existence of Wakanda from the beginning, just stared here. If this is the case, where did this man come from? Did he know the past and the future across the timeline, or did he simply come from a parallel universe?
She doesn't want to see Wakanda also be exterminated, but according to her current results derived from complex formulas, this is the most likely situation. Although her wisdom focuses more on research and development of technology, she is not good at evaluating psychology and using mathematics to budget for the future, but this kind of inadequacy is also difficult for ordinary people to achieve in their life.
This villain, I will never let him take away our vibranium mine. Everything else can be discussed, except vibranium can't. We will fight to the end. The old king stood up angrily, his slightly curved body, still revealing a sense of majesty. T'Challa took a step forward and said, they have millions of troops. Even if we mobilize all the soldiers, on average, each soldier will have to kill several robots to achieve victory. This is because he did not take us away, in the case of vibranium machinery. This is our last support, vibranium mine. Su Rui suddenly said, vibranium has the ability to absorb and reflect all energy. We can only hope that the man's ability will also be absorbed by vibranium. If this is the case, we can win. But according to her calculations, this is simply impossible. As long as the other party wants to, he can continuously draw off troops from other parts of the world at any time, and in a short period of time, all countries have no way to do it. Su Rui looked at the screen with a sense of despair in her heart. Her wisdom was only wisdom after all, not absolute combat power. Wakanda, will it perish? If it doesn't work, surrender. I have to design a detailed plan for surrender after defeat. There are 17 million possible words he can say, and the probability of rejection. The content of the promise is derived. Su Rui thought silently. When she was young, she had to start these complicated calculations.